morning, everyone. We'll start our next session. I want to introduce to you Shane Fugere. He is originally a member of the Pic-Mobert First Nation, now a member of Pays Plat First Nation. He grew up in Pic-Mobert in the 80s and 90s during his adolescent years, and since lived in many areas of northwestern Ontario, including Long Lac, Pays Plat, and Thunder Bay. Shane has faced many barriers trying to get into the trades from a young age due to a lack of direction, role models, funding, and experience. He began to self-teach welding in 1999 and eventually decided to take on a welding course with Confederation College in 2001. In 2012 is when Shane became a professional welder while working at Bombardier Transportation in Thunder Bay. It wasn't until he became a journeyman welder that he found out about his trades union and how he can assist people to getting into the trades. It was after joining Liuna, L-I-U-N-A, Shane will talk about that, in 2015 that he got noticed and asked to become a regional organizer and Indigenous representative with Liuna 607. He made it his mission to reach out to Indigenous communities and organizations across Ontario to help facilitate economic career opportunities, generational change for Indigenous people. Everyone welcome Shane.
Chimiwich, Bob. So as Bob had mentioned in my introduction, I'm originally from Pic-Mobert. So I guess I'll introduce the eras, right? Because just like this puzzle piece, there are so many bits and pieces to all of our lives. I don't recall anyone ever being born and having a clear picture as to how their life's going to turn out. Anyone? I didn't think so. So I like to use analogies when I speak with people. I love speaking to young people about opportunities in the trades and that. And it's very unfortunate when I was in high school, and it was a bygone era, you know, or even in elementary school. We had Hemlo right at Manitouage Corner, 3 large gold mines going at one time, and my God, the amount of wealth taken out of those 3 mines was just mind-blowing, right? The towns of Manitouage had beautiful homes, beautiful recreation centers, Marathon, White River. But what did we have in Pic-Mobert? Overcrowding, lots of overcrowding, substandard rec center, substandard schools. We had pump houses that were our water treatment plant. And it was tough, you know. We had all these economic barriers towards us, and this was the 80s, the 90s. We didn't have these opportunities, and nobody was coming to our schools talking about the trades or anything else. So my granny would do puzzles with us in the evening. And, well, I guess I should go back to this, right? Because we're part of the Loon clan. Sean Desmolin and I were cousins. And he'll tell you, we all grew up crowded in the wintertime in these homes, and then spring would come along and we would all just live at the powwow grounds in tents and everything else because there was no homes, but because we were so crowded in our homes and that we all couldn't stand to look at each other. So summertime would come along, or springtime would come, and we would stay at the powwow grounds pretty much until the fall, or it got too cold. It was just brutal, right? So I also live in a time of the day school system, and like many of us in this room, we're also a product of the residential school system. And no one has really good memories about any of that, right? So we had poverty and everything else. And it's hard to see a complete picture of what your life is going to be like when you're seeing so much poverty and everything else. So it was rough. And then I remember I met my wife, she's in the back there. It was during a youth rally, and met some of the other people here as well back then at a youth rally and different powwows and types of things. And Anishinaabe being Anishinaabe, right? We all go out. We never know who we're going to bump into, who we're going to go to school with, who we're going to be friends with. You just never know who you're going to go to school with. And it's great to see so many familiar faces in this room and seeing the evolution we've all had, because we've all been there. We've all faced these same struggles and it's really refreshing to see how we've evolved. We're part of that generational change, changing that socio-economic realities of the past to a more modern one, a progressive one. Our kids aren't seeing the poverty that we experienced. Our kids are knowing about financial planning. They're knowing about credit. They're knowing that an education is very important. And they're all getting things, like an honor roll. My cousin Sean and I were just laughing, right? Because in grade school and high school, I don't think we ever made the dean's list. We made the principal's list, but not the dean's list or anything like that, right? So you just never know who you're going to go to school with. And then we became parents at the age of 17 and life happens, right? And going back to the puzzle, you never know what's going to come out of your life, what puzzle piece is coming up next. Nothing's ever clearly planned and that. So when you're a young family, you face racism, you face ageism, there's real barriers out there. Back then, the governments weren't funding the ISETs the way they do now. There was no real training opportunities to get a trade. No one was speaking about the trades. I know in high school, people were talking about the trades as if it was a dead end. There's no future in it. They really looked down on people in the blue-collar industry and the trade, so they didn't push it. I'm glad to see that today the high schools, the government, the unions, and the ISETs, they've all come together to address this, because it's tradespeople that build the homes. It's tradespeople that build the infrastructure for our economy. And I'm just going through some of these slideshows, right, just to show my family and everything else. Because like I said, when you're a young family and that, no one wants to take you serious. There's so many different barriers. It's rough. But we've all been there, right? So the next slide is on my family background and that, right? Once again, Anishinaabe being Anishinaabe, you never know who you're going to be related to. and that. So I wanted to share my family lineage with everyone, and also to show that we are from the Loon clan and we have a very different way of looking at things. We could soar high and see a holistic approach. We could dive down, get closer, and even dive down really deep to get a closer look at what some of the issues are, some of the problems, coming up with creative solutions as to fix these things, or at least try and bang our heads together and come up with a solution with our friends and our team members. So as Bob's said, faced so many different struggles, and that worked as a sawmill laborer when I first graduated from college. Yep. And back then, policing didn't pay what it does now. So believe it or not, I was making more as a sawmill laborer. And it's funny, people wonder, well, how does leadership get noticed? What defines a leader? What defines someone marketable in that? And you know what? It's something as simple as work ethic. Showing up to work, not being late. If you're given a task, perform it to the best of your duties. You can't fake work ethic, but you can fake what you have on your resume. And that's very important for people to know. Your work ethic will speak volumes about you, so you don't even have to discuss things on your resume. Your resume is just your story, your journey through life. And I remember when I was first hired at Bombardier, they said, "Oh, you took welding back in 2000. You want to be a welder right away?" I'm like, "Man, I haven't touched a welder in like 7 years. I would really hate to be hired as a welder and then get fired for not being up to snuff." So I said, "I'll start off as a laborer, and then if a position comes up, I'll bid on it, right?" And that's what happened, right? I was at Bombardier working as a finisher, and I loved it. You know, I'd go into work every day, getting paid to build things and work with my hands. I'm one of those people that just love to work with my hands. And that's where I also got noticed at Bombardier, was my work ethic, and that someone suggested that I apply for welding right away, even though I was cold, and I mean I was cold. Welding's one of these perishable skill sets, just like, I don't know, an athlete or something. If you're not always jogging, you're not going to be able to run a marathon in 5 years from now if you haven't been jogging. So anyways, there I am as a welder now for Bombardier. And my foreman on that likes how I was always at work. You know, I was always asking for extra things to do if I was done my sub-assemblies and everything else. And I got noticed, right? And I was talking with Springer earlier about our Bombardier times and that. And yeah, there was racism there as well, right? People would play games. They would shut off your gas while you're welding and hit things while you're welding just to screw up your welds and that, so you'd have to grind it and redo it. Or they'd have the weld inspector come by and pick apart your welds and that. But it was a good thing. It really was, because it forced me to become a better welder. And then an opportunity for the LRV line came up where they needed a lead welder, someone that liked doing repair work. Wow, I love doing repair work because unlike being a production welder, everything's on a flat. You have a rollover jig and you're doing the same boxes over and over and over. But when you're doing repair work, you're always spinning those gears and that. You're always thinking, you're always learning something new. And then another piece of the puzzle, right? You may notice on the bottom corner there, there's a picture of all my different certificates and that at Bombardier. So we go on strike and that, and a lot of us were very upset that we were on strike for a second time at the plant. But me being a journey person welder at the time, and oil being, I think it was $115 a barrel or something, it was just crazy. I did what nobody in their rational mind would do. My wife was pretty livid with me. I traded in my truck and bought 2 brand new vehicles that day. She was not happy. I'm on strike, right? How am I going to pay for these things? But it was my way of telling Bombardier and myself that I'm a journey person welder now. I could go anywhere in Canada and weld. And she happened to have a conference or something in Niagara Falls, and I was done my strike duty for the week. So I decided I would attend with her. And I think it was 2 days. I'm sitting around the hotel room, you know, walking around the falls and everything else, and she's doing her conference, and I'm bored. So I grab my phone, download the Indeed app, put on my resume, you know, and I just type in camp welder. Applied for 2, no, I just posted it, sorry. And at that time, they really needed welders and everything. Because like I said, the oil fields were going strong in Fort Mac, same thing with Newfoundland and everything else, and I get 2 calls. Both of them from Newfoundland asking when I could start, because as you see on that slide there, there's many tickets on there. There's steel, stainless, aluminum, stick, TIG, and MIG. So I was very versatile at the time and pretty cocky, I ain't gonna lie. Bombardier tasked me with some very difficult positions doing repair work and that. And at the time, I also had 2 weld inspectors, one from the TTC and one from Bombardier. And then on top of that, I also had cameras filming me for doing the modifications on the LRV line. That's where you see me laying down. And a lot of that was mirror welding, and these welds had to last at least 30 years. So there was a lot of stress, and I'm in a lot of stress. So I became cocky, right? So anyways, next slide. I get the call to go out to Newfoundland and I'm like, can I at least have a couple days just so I can finish my holidays off and that? So I go to Newfoundland and it was great. I mean, it was amazing. They paid for all your flights and that. You're in this camp job, and it's my first time in a camp. And for it being my first time in a camp, I think I was spoiled, because this was a $14.5 billion project. I was bringing home, I think, $13,000 a month back then. So I go from Bombardier, where I'm making, I think it was $4,200 after deductions, to like $13,000. So it's just blowing away, right? I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me about the trade unions? Why didn't I know about the trade unions, right? So I'm out in Newfoundland on this Hebron project and making friends with all the different trades, you know, the iron workers, the laborers, the electricians, the teamsters, and everything else. They're saying, yeah, you're a journey person welder now. You could go anywhere in the world. You could belong to more than one trade union. I'm like, really? Wow, that's amazing, right? So sure enough, I get back to Thunder Bay and apply at some of the different trade unions and that, and LaUna scoops me up. And that's how I end up at the New Gold project. And you got to remember, I'm still new to the unions and all this other stuff. And I didn't realize that not all unions are alike, unfortunately. And some unions, they'll take you on as full members. Some unions, they're just project-specific agreements where you're paying into the dues and you're getting the union rates, but once that job's done, you're not in the union unless they want you, or you pay the initiation fee. Well, we all have to pay the initiation fee, but I remember working with some of the local community members on that, and, you know, they're doing the same thing as me. You know, they're buying the toys because you're making trade money. You're making really good money. I think it was $6,500 a rotation or something like that. It was just crazy. And that, yeah, it was great, right? And then some of the community members and that, they take my advice and that. And I say, yeah, you just go on to the next job and keep traveling and everything else, maintain your dues and that. Well, some of them, they weren't brought into the unions and that, or they didn't pay their initiations, so they're wondering why they didn't get the calls and that. And that frustrated me, right? I'm like, here I am talking about the unions and everything else. How come no one's doing that? Wrong button. All right. Next slide. So people always ask me, and I get insulted, right? Who are you related to? Who do you know? Because back in the day, when we were in high school, I remember that you had to know someone at McDonald's. You had to know someone at Walmart just to get a job, just to get the interview. It was crazy, right? So now, here I am in the union and that, and everyone's talking about me. And I show up at a union meeting and everything like that at LaUna. Then after the meeting, the business manager and the assistant business manager asked to speak with me. I'm like, well, what's going on, right? And then they said, well, did you ever consider coming into the office? And I was taken away by this, right? Because I've only been in LaUna for 9 months, and I was like wondering, why are they asking me to go into the office? Well, I guess it got back to the union reps and that through the shop stewards and everything else, that I was always talking to people about the trades. I was always talking about, you know, doing right by our coworkers and that, and being safe. you know, talking about the different benefits, having a pension that follows you and everything else. And I guess they really like that, right? So they asked me to be a union rep. And I thought, well, this is great, because growing up, like I said, there's nobody talking about the trades and nobody talking about anything. Everyone in school and that would say that you need to go to university and college, get a diploma, get your initials and everything else. Nobody's going to hire blue collar workers. Blue collars are lower than, I don't know, garbage men, but garbage men are very important. Recyclers and everything else. We all play that key role in society. So I thought it was great, right? Yeah, so going back to here, you know, work ethic gets noticed regardless of what you're doing and where you're doing it. Everybody talks. You can't fake a hard-working ethic, as well as just being yourself, being real, not milking a job. And got to tell you, in the downturn of the early 2000s, and that when the sawmills closed, the forestry sector pretty much imploded, we were all struggling for a job. I drove the medical van in Pace Plat for 4 years. You know, there was no opportunities out there. Nobody was training anyone. It was rough. We still had a family to provide for in that. And, well, life happens. We still need to pay our bills. So I took any job out there. And like I said, your work ethic gets noticed. So my time at LIUNA as an Indigenous rep, in that I got to meet all the different ISETs. You know, Ziggy reached out and Ziggy invited me to speak at DFC, speak with the SLAM students, work with him on different training opportunities and different types of planning, you know, speaking at the career fairs and that, and Sioux Lookout. And I always love speaking with young people because, like I was saying, I wish someone would have been speaking about the trades and the various opportunities and that when I was younger. So I wanted to be who I needed as a youth, and that I wanted to be that positive role model. Now I'm a model, but I'm a bit round. Yeah. So these are some of the highlights of my career when I was with LIUNA. You know, we had Justin Trudeau come to our office. I was at a CCAB event several times and that, and I remember speaking in these different break-off rooms and that, about the different types of economic opportunities out there and that. And then I was at the National Convention in Montreal where I was brought there and I was given a standing ovation for all the work I was given. And I was just taken back by it, right? And then someone came up to me and they said, I've been coming to this event now for 20 years. I don't think they know who I am. Who are you and why are you doing this? And I remember being taken back by that, right? And I said, well, I've got nothing left, nothing to lose, because I really don't mind working with my hands. I find it very stress relieving. I enjoy working with my hands, so I'm going to do things the way I want to do things. I'm going to make the changes I want to see, and if you don't like it, too bad. But they all seem to like it, and then a lot of our partners seem to like how I was speaking more than just about the trades. I was coming to them about these projects that are going to be in their area. I was talking to them about career opportunities for the community members before even the project started up. I would ask, who do you have in your community that wants to work or take free training or work with our ISETs, you know, whether they be SLAM, AETS, Seven Generations, KKEX. You know, we were all looking for people. And I remember before the East-West High came out, or East-West High power transmission line, we were going into all the communities on that, talking about all these opportunities. Well, the economy back then was still sluggish. It's not where it is today, where there's more jobs than there are people. So it was great to see all these young people in our communities and that coming out, learning about the different opportunities. And, you know, we were all speaking about generational change, and I'd show them the pay stubs from when I was on the tools and show them the different types of lifestyle that they could have, things that are going to change your entire family and everything else. And it was great. But that was pre-COVID. I know last week we were at the NADF Workforce Development, and all of us in the room in that, we were wondering, what the heck happened? Nowadays we have training dollars, we have all these projects and that, but we're having a hard time to recruit real candidates to our various training opportunities, and even for our projects where you're guaranteed a job out of this project. It's very disheartening to see that people in our communities aren't taking some of these opportunities. So I wanted to speak about that because I felt it was very important, right? I know all of us in this room, we're facing that. We have all these mines going up, all these mines in operation, all these restaurants, all these various opportunities, and people just aren't partaking in them. They're not grasping at them. And where the heck were these opportunities when we were all younger, you know? I drove the medical van for 4 years. $12,000 a year is all I made. You know, it's disheartening that people aren't taking these high-paying jobs. And I would speak to these at the various conferences and that, or career fairs and that. And then going back to high school and that, like I was saying earlier, people look down upon the blue-collar careers and saying that, you know, you'll always be just a laborer, you'll always be just a welder. And I remember attending some of these events and that with my spouse and that. And people would ask, oh, what did you take in university? You know, like, how do you understand the economics of these different projects? How do you understand all these different terms and that? Well, going back to the puzzle, you never know which part you're going to pull up in these puzzles or in your life and that, and how all these singular events, they just lead to that larger picture. You know, it's great to see so many young faces and people I've grown up with and people I've seen evolve into these managers, these project managers, these directors, these business owners. And I remember struggling with the one company I was at. Well, I guess a few, I'm not gonna lie. Where you would have these academics that didn't have that real world application of their knowledge try and tell you you were doing your job wrong. You didn't know what you were talking about. And they would get on their computers, you know, they would zoom in on a project or a part to be welded, and they would say, you have plenty of room to work on something. You know, all you have to do is turn your body around. Well, this is a fully finished train car, or this is a fully finished building. You can't just zoom in like you would on your computer screen. You know, there's ramifications to all of this, and rework's very expensive in that. And those of you in business and that know that rework is very expensive, demolition is very expensive, deficiencies are very expensive, And as a tradesperson, you know this. So like I was speaking about earlier, well, that's a leadership quality that gets noticed by your employer, your foreman, and everything else. So they see who wants to do a proper job. It's not about doing it fast, it's about doing it right. It's about your reputation, making sure it all gets done correctly. So we all evolve, right? And people will say, well, you've changed. Well, we have to change, right? So that's why I thought it was important to put that there. A lot of times people in our communities, they're afraid of change, or they say, you've got that attitude now. You're right. I do have that attitude now. You know, that sense of pride. If I'm on a project and I'm doing something, I want to be proud to put my name to it and say, I've done that, I've worked on that. We had a great time. We had a great team there, you know, made so many friends on this project. So, like I spoke to earlier, my career started off as just a sawmill laborer, got noticed, got promoted, even had the mill manager show up at my sister's house and ask if I wanted to trade, because I remember asking those millwrights and mechanics, how do I get a trade? And because I wasn't part of their clique, nobody was telling me how I get a trade. Well, look where I am now. Look where some of you are in this room. I've worked with some of you. Now you're all managers. I'm proud. I'm very proud of that. You know, how many times did people look down on us because we were tradespeople? Now we're managers. So like I said, it's about presenting our youth with a viable option, changing the socio-economic realities of the past to a more modern one, you know, instilling that, get out there, earn it, be proud of it. It's not showing off, you know. Go on those fancy trips, take your friends in it. We all want to travel vicariously with our friends. You know, it's by these shared experiences online and that we're building each other up. You know, we're promoting that positive lifestyle of get out there and earn it. That brand recognition, you know, you've worked hard your whole life. People know you for who you are. That's why you keep getting the job offers that you get, or people asking your opinion on something. It's not because you dazzled them with BS. Sure, you may have faked it till you made it a few times, or you stumbled through it, right? Be proud of who you are. Your relationships in life are extremely important. You just never know who you may have went to high school with or elementary school with, you know. I still laugh at myself, and I look at some of my high school friends or friends as a youth and that, and we're all leaders now. And you know, we used to drive around the res listening to Wu-Tang and, you know, just being kids and going swimming and doing all these crazy things, right? And I remember looking at some of our friends and that saying, when did we get so old? Or we say, remember 30 years ago? And then my one chum says to me, can you say 30 years ago? I said, well, if you didn't realize, my daughter's 30 now. So yes, it was 30 years ago. So letters from my generation. As I spoke to earlier, I'm truly envious of the amount of opportunities and supports given to our youth and young people. You know, to go out there and get a career, get a second career, change something, you know. In the early 2000s and that, I wanted so hard to become a miner because like I said, there was Hemlo right at the Manitowoc corner and the 3 active gold mines. We all seen the nice toys that the miners had, all the fancy toys. I wanted that, but there was no funding back then. Not like there is today. There was no supports. So I'm very envious that more young people aren't going out there and taking it and finishing it a lot of times. And you know what? That's not true. There have been some large success stories out there. It's great to see, and programs like OYEP. OYEP is like a summer camp where they teach you how to be a productive adult, I guess you would say. You know, you learn about money management, the different certificates that you gain in these programs and that. So rather than a job at McDonald's or something else, you're actually learning how to be a proper adult and have that work ethic and be proud. And I've noticed that most people that have OEUP on their resumes that would come across my desk, either as a union rep or as an employer at whether it be White Lake, Gold Shore, and the other places I've worked, I've always noticed that they had what it took to succeed in that, and it was great to see. So that's why I wanted to rephrase that there are young people out there taking these opportunities and succeeding, but they're not telling their story, or they're not being given the opportunity to tell their story that often. We need more of these community champions out there on social media, you know, showing the home that they just bought, the truck they just bought. And I'll tell you, the first truck we bought was an $800 piece of crap, but it was all we could afford back then. Now we're seeing people with their first brand new truck, and it's $60,000 because they've learned about credit, they've learned about money management through programs like OYEP or the different training opportunities that are out there now. NADF is teaching financial literacy, and same thing with SLAM and 7 Gens. So it's great to see that young people are learning these skills of saving up and learning about credit. So like I said, be somebody. Be that positive role model. Be that hero you wanted as a kid. So the other thing we also have to ask ourselves is, we always talk about the future generations. What kind of world are we going to leave our kids? Do we want to keep up with the status quo, or do we want to leave them better than how we've evolved ourselves? And I see a lot of that now. I'm very proud. I've spoken about how a lot of our people in our age group have kids that have gone on to become doctors, lawyers, engineers. You know, they're on a roll, members and everything else, and it's great to see. Well, that's all I got, I guess. Oh wait, one more slide. I was always surrounded by adversity in my life, and still am. All of us are. None of us are alone in this, right? Like I keep going back to the puzzle piece, it all adds up to who we are, helps shape us. We don't know what our final picture will be because we don't always have this picture given to us and that. So power through the tough times. Go get your training, get your education. Grades matter. And I remember telling our CCW students that, our cement finishers, that your trainers are evaluating you. All of this is being noticed. You know, there's going to be a few types of people in the crowd. There's going to be the people that really want that training. They want to power through it. And then there are going to be some of these professional trainees that just want to keep taking training opportunities as a way to get off the res for a bit, go be a baller in the city. And it's sad that some people waste that opportunity when it could be given to someone else. Then your work ethic. Regardless of what you're doing and how you're doing it, you can't fake being a hard worker. It's a lot harder to look like you're being busy than really being busy. And your integrity can't be faked. Your integrity gets noticed. And then success. All of us in life, we have our ups and downs. As hard as it may seem to admit, we need those ups and downs. They're another piece of that puzzle. They help shape us. They help create that larger picture of who we are. So you know what? Play that game. Play that game to win. Don't cheat, but play that game to win. You know, be proud. That's why we all play sports. It's not showing off. Just be proud of it. Be proud of your accomplishments, who you are. Be that champion for your community. Well, like I said, Chimigwech, and if anyone has any questions. Thank you. Any questions? Good. Chimigwech, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Shane, for sharing your story and providing that input and that being that advocate for the trades, because that's one of the important things that we need in the communities is to have the trades, where it's welding and carpentry, plumbing, everything like and the stuff that's being built in the communities, the new schools, the new water plants, those need trades, a lot of trades. And it's nice to have that ability to be able to have that community member to be able to support their community by having them involved in a project. So appreciate that. Thank you, Shane.